Our next presenter is Michelle Zimmerman. And I'm going to pause for a second, because when I looked up Michelle, the first website I found that is her voice says people first. I'm going to say that again. People first. And it's the technology that supports humanity. So I liked her philosophy right away as I read about her beliefs as an educator. She wrote a book for us. It's called Teaching AI, Exploring the New Frontier. And I'm of an age that when I started in my teaching career, I was the teacher not afraid of technology. We had a new lab, nobody was in there. So I remember thinking, I'm on the frontier. I'm the one who's willing to share with the other teachers. But we need to keep the frontiers. That's that part of on the shoulders of giants, we keep evolving and innovating. So I would like you to join me in welcoming Michelle Zimmerman.
When we don't know what to do, when we're told no. Through the last couple of years, we've had so many no's. We've had times where we looked back and reflected at shattered mirrors, shattered dreams and hopes. We think about the times that we jump into a puddle feet first. It can be fun, it can be scary, it can be dangerous. Miss Frizzle said, take chances, make mistakes, and get messy. But for some of us, going into the pandemic, the take chances, make mistakes, and get messy is terrifying because it could be life and death. I was not only in the classroom teaching, but responsible for the COVID response plan, and that meant looking back into history to see what it meant with pandemics, what went on before, how long we needed to predict. I stumbled on some things about the sleeping sickness and things that were mysterious conditions after those types of pandemics. And in the last couple of years, more research has come out showing that there are cognitive impacts that have happened through COVID and long COVID. So we know that this is relevant now, but unless we look at the past and look at the future to determine what to do now, we could miss some very important information. Through the pandemic, people would say, well, we've never done this before. But in history, we had documentation of times and places that people did things before without technology. We can't get together in the same way, but this is a photo of my grandmother because she was a teacher. I found out 125 years of my family line before me were all teachers and in education. And so when we look at the collaboration and communication that we've been talking about for a decade, using technology as a center of education, we look at humans first, but when the pandemic separated us, we didn't have that close contact with technology in the front. We were relegated to different types of approaches. And so when I look back at what I wrote pre-pandemic, preparing for an unknown and in the future, and I wondered what's changed and shifted through this time, in some ways, not a lot. We're still a far ways off from generalized artificial intelligence and from being able to replicate the way human thinks, learns, and acts. But things that are still relevant are things that were rooted in culture. I mentioned this practice about broken pottery. Instead of discarding it and tossing it away, the broken pieces are fitted together and highlighted with gold so that brokenness becomes part of the story. This is relevant when we think about our education systems, our healthcare systems, and how technology can support that learning. It's called kintsugi, and little did I know I would be going to a physical therapy place bearing the same name. I didn't plan to go through this. I planned to be an educator and researcher and a school leader through the pandemic, not to be highlighted in the British Medical Journal for not being able to return to the classroom for over 15 months. I didn't plan that the good health and well-being of global goals for sustainable development would be something that would be so part of what I was doing. To go from public speaking, book authoring, and researching to having a cognitive test that showed a 21st percentile was a huge blow to me because my identity was in being able to contribute, to being able to give back, to add to knowledge, to look at the ISTE standards of being able to say, how do you construct knowledge, how to communicate in a creative way. Through the time that I lost verbal speech and brain injury, I knew I needed to do something even though people said we don't know what to do. But I knew educational research tools that existed, things like Duolingo that used AI. And I started using that to help recover speech before I had a chance to have a speech therapist. And since then, I've become even more fascinated with the way that AI has an interplay with using humanity as the center and being able to recover language. So I'm standing here today with vision therapy, vestibular therapy, physical therapy, and speech therapy for over 15 months. I'm still unrecovered, but I'm also a data point in this work with IncelDX. You saw the confusion matrix in the one that Duolingo used, and IncelDX also uses a confusion matrix as part of AI, looking at patterns in people's blood, finding the commonalities across so many different people. Hundreds of thousands of people are going through post-acute viral infections or long COVID. There are different combinations and intersections of what's happening, a lot that are impacting the brain. And through this time that I wanted to contribute, I couldn't read, so I used Wakelet. I imported and added some of the medical research, and then I had natural language processing and speech-to-text help me when I was unable to read. Microsoft Translator. You may see my glasses and say, what's going on with those? No, it's not a fashion statement. No, it's not the newest thing from Paris. But years ago, my student said, I wish that you would get glasses without lenses and, put tape on the nose bridge. That's pretty cool. It's like one of those geeky things. Little did they know that I would be using that because of traumatic brain injury and a low-tech solution to help me be able to stand vertically and to read. This is my brain. This is the change that's happened. All the areas that are circled are some of the damaged areas. I'm zooming in on the bottom part so that you can see what has happened to my reading since. I went from a level of researching to now what's identified as a second grade reading level. I understand now what it feels like to be high functioning and go into the ability of not being able to read, and now I've come across a whole section of research and technology that can track your vision and pupils to find out different types of anomalies in vision that aren't just about 20/20. So in this idea of moving forward with children, we're having our kids use AI not just for coding, but trying to figure out how AI can approach and solve problems and challenges. Microsoft has Imagine Cup and AI for accessibility, so that was the challenge for our students this year. They decided to come up with a reading tool, something that would help support text and books that are not yet audiobooks. They were focused on dyslexia, but little did they know that their innovation would touch me in a deep way because I was struggling with reading for the first time. And so I wanted you to be able to see their process and how they talk about this.
Throughout time, humans have been met with obstacles that lead them to wonder about how problems can be solved or heavily impacted in a positive way. In the month of May, students at Renton Prep took on a STEAM Fair project that related back to the Microsoft AI for Good categories. In this project, we picked a category to discuss and found a problem within the subject that we could find a solution to. We picked the AI for Accessibility category, which focuses on improving global independence and inclusion in society in 4 areas of focus that include home, community, education, and employment. We specifically wanted to delve into the issue of learning/literacy difficulties and how we could create a different product that stood out from anything in the current market. This was our process.
Reading disabilities come in different variations, making it difficult to diagnose some of them. Nonetheless, dyslexia is one of the most frequent. Although formal classifications of dyslexia are always evolving, comparable criteria have been devised to help diagnose dyslexia when it occurs. Dyslexics often struggle to match letter sounds to symbols and then put them together to make words. Researchers have been investigating learning problems and dyslexia since the 17th century, but it wasn't until the mid-19th century that scientists began to pay attention to these issues.
Worldwide, almost 20% of the population has a reading disorder, and only 4% of those people will receive special education services to help them. This is a huge problem, as it leads to having 16% of the population with reading disorders not having the resources to read normally. Due to complications or restrictions related to digital resources, not all books can be or have been transferred to a digital input, leaving a gap of opportunity for those who want to experience a book's story, but can't access a form of it where they can comfortably read it. Our mission was to close the restricting gap of this issue and solve a problem that is rarely discussed. In order to address the problem, we wanted our product to be accessible and easy to use.
Our team had began working on ideas and made a starting blueprint which we modified later on after brainstorming a new concept. We implemented ethics that related back to why our product fit in as being things like reliable, safe, inclusive, transparent, accountable, fair, and more. Our final idea was to create a portable and electrochemically powered audio device that is able to read line by line of a book back to a reader. This was the rough draft of our product, and we would later create a realistic 3D model to create a better visual presentation. It displays a screen scanner that can also slide according to wherever the reader is on a page. It also has a speaker located in the front, book clamps on the sides, audio and language adjusters on the scanner ends, a headphone port, and a charging jack.
Throughout our involvement in this project, we were able to look deeper.
So you can see the full collection in the Wakelets you can find in the digital tote. You heard them say closing the gap, something that exists and something that doesn't. So to model what I'm asking my students to do, I'm taking the research that I've learned across the past 15 months and the past year before that with COVID, and writing a book to close the gap between research in the medical field and clinical practice. In that, it will include educational resources for doctors who can point them to speech therapy help through things like Duolingo, through research projects, through being able to have assistive devices, because long COVID has a huge wave of impact that will be coming, impacting teachers and students. Education Week reported that 1 in 5 teachers have indicated that COVID has impacted their life for long term. We want to make a difference, and AI for good. Thank you.